Yep, there you go. Alrighty. Um, Let me actually keep my phone open so I know that people are commenting stuff when I'm streaming. So let me see. There you go. And now we see if people are commenting. But yeah. How's it going, everybody? My name is Infamous Isaac, streaming again, playing this game, and if I sound off, it's because I'm sick. So I'm sorry about that. But that's the only reason why I'm streaming today because I usually work today, so I'm gonna try to use my sickness to my advantage. Usually would have been editing, but generally just didn't feel like it today, so might as well do something else, right? But yeah, so gonna continue. Last time we where was it? Yeah, so last time, oh, I cannot talk. Yeah, last time we played, it was Sojiro and Aoko. They met for the first time. No words exchanged, legit. They just met. That's it. And before that, it was getting to meet Aoko, seeing her in her house, and then before that, it was getting a story about a girl who turned on the engine of a car, and unfortunately, there was a family of cats in it, and they got shredded by the car because it was during the '80s and cars weren't as a mess as they are now. So that story started off the game, and now we're here. Not too far, like I think not far at all. But yeah, we're gonna continue. We're gonna see what happens. It was commonly believed among the students that Aoko was always in a foul mood. But this gossip was 90% prejudice. Let me turn down the volume for this game. I don't know why it's so loud right now. Oh, it's not my thing. It's configurations, volume, yeah, audio. Just a smidgen because my ears, they're bleeding. But yeah. But this gossip was 90% prejudice, as Akko simply didn't have time to be irritated 24/7. The reality was she was simply teasing. The reality was she simply didn't want to explain herself all the time, and therefore seemed angry about something, obvious or not. This idle gossip did, however, lead to her earning the title of one of the school's 7 deadly threats. The remaining 10% of the gossip was right on the mark. Alko herself often had the feeling that her tendency to feel animosity towards harmless things was akin to what a chronic headache sufferer might experience. Today fell under that 10%. For today her anger was pure, and her childish and selfish display was befitting of her actual age. Yeah, she's 17. Crazy. The meeting room was dimly lit, awash in the colors of the rain. To reduce electricity costs, school regulations forbid the use of lights during the day. That's really weird. Because my school used it all the time, but then again, the US and Japan have different living standards, so that makes sense. This is the setting the three of them found themselves in. Her first impression was that his calm demeanor reminded her of a field of wildflowers. In spite of his perfect posture, his overall air felt placid, tame even. And though describing him as meek would be going too far, at the very least he was passive. Even through his uniform, she could see that he was thinner than average. His dark hair was unkempt, and he came across as a wholly forgettable boy. If she had to look at him in a more positive light, she would describe him more a young man than a boy. It was his calm demeanor that made him seem more mature. Was that the cause of Ako's reasonless reaction? Oh, got a couple people. Yeah. Actually, hold on. Give me 1 second. Yeah, I don't even have to mute myself. Just give me 1 second. Backlog. Alrighty. Well, guess I'm just gonna thug it out. Anyways, she felt an unidentifiable aggravation building within her, almost as if her right to be here was in question. Aoko felt herself raising her natural defenses. She hated not understanding things, her own emotions in particular. That's, hmm, well, yeah, fair enough. That is a comma worthy place. Who am I to question a game that's been vetted by multiple people, right? It paid her less than you would imagine. For a perfectionist like her, but it still nagged her like a thorn at her side. Mr. Yamashiro's attempt to relieve the tension was equally irritating. Wow, you can tell. After casting a nasty glaze in the teacher's direction, Aoka turned to face the boy. From an outsider's perspective, it may have looked like a stare down. And in that instant, the culmination of her emotional state hurtled toward the innocent boy and skewered him. Hearing his name, Sojo came to his senses. His stunned gaze shook loose. He took a deep breath to clear his head. Chalking it up to nerves, Mr. Yamashiro broke out a smile and turned to the girl standing beside him. Having been introduced to Mr. Yamashiro, the girl took a step forward. Her eyes were merciless, her stare an unspoken threat to violently trample her opponent. Sojiro, on the other hand, managed to keep his own composure despite the shock at how confrontational she appeared. He had never been greeted quite like this before, but suppose, mistakenly, that this weird. Yeah, that confused me a little bit. But suppose mistakenly that this was how people treated each other in the city. The exchange must have looked quite dramatic to an onlooker. A girl ready to brawl, an earnest country boy desperate to understand. It was murderous limbo, especially for anyone in the room with them. Like Mr. Yamashiro, for example. While he had thought he had made the right decision in choosing an honor student to help him out, she was in an inexplicably bad mood, and the tension in the air was undeniable. It was at this moment that he realized his failure. His realization had come far too late. One false move, and this girl, for whom no problem was too large, would be becoming a storm that would rock the very foundations of the school. Why not make him blue? Like, if you have the red here and him blue, since he's not serene, but innocent and not nonchalant either. That's not a good descriptor. What was the word that they said? Hello. Keep forgetting that tab isn't the button for every game. Let me see. Escape, configure, controls, control description. There you go. Backlog. Oh, is it R? It is. Look at that. There you go. He was composed. That's the word. But yeah, anyways. Just as the almighty Joker card could bring either fortune or disaster, the sole teacher who had been present at the time would come to bear the blame for the scandal that ensued. This dude is fried, bro. What the heck? He's gonna get fired. Mr. Yamashiro laughed nervously as he crept toward the door. He has a really deep voice. Like, It's I don't know if it's the language barrier, but his voice is really deep. Considering that he's like well, not middle age, but he's in his mid 20s. That voice is pretty deep. But I digress. Mr. Yamashiro left, leaving the two in a locked-eyed state, one in which one set of eyes was doing all the glaring. All that remained in the room was an artless boy and a cross-armed, guarded girl. The two lingered in silence. They resembled shogi players, agonizing over their first moves, though it was only Aoko who was reading so much into that situation. She decided to put her irritation aside for the time being. With no reason to feel revulsion for him in the first place, she sighed deeply and faced Sojiro. I forgot that was voice acted. Her tone was nothing if not reproachful, though he had done nothing to offend her. But the boy failed to pick up on it. Incapable of such venom himself, for whatever reason, he came across as happy in his response. Goodness, I keep forgetting. The boy replied immediately as if it was a natural response, but quickly second guessed himself. She followed her blunt reply with a swift turn away from him. While she was hardly thrilled at the prospect of the task at hand, it had been entrusted to her, and it was her personal policy to see it through to the end. Ako's blunt rancor was lost in him once again. She's getting mad that he's not getting tilted, bro. What the heck? Over here trying to rage bait? You're sick. Humans tend to be overly conscious about being ignored, whatever form that takes. But despite being peeved at letting none of her attacks, Aoko did her best to act professional and directed her guest into the hallway. There was no sunlight in the hallway, nor any sign of life. This was more like a prison than a cave. That was the meeting room. As it dawned on Aoko that the hallway matched her mood, she sighed once again. Alright. Aoko rubbed her forehead. This Sojiro kid had no idea what he was in for. Apparently, all he had heard about school was that it was a place where a lot of people met to study. High school teachers imparted to students their knowledge of various fields of study, while fostering discipline and creativity. But never did Aoko imagine that she would have to explain the concept of school itself to someone. Yes, fundamentals were important, but this was absurd. She had serious doubts whether he could even handle classes, but Mr. Yamashiro insisted that things would work out somehow. Sojiro had managed to pass the transfer exam after all. Barely. Aoko grumbled mentally as she walked down the hallway. She consoled herself with the fact that today would be the only day she spent with this boy out of time, or at least she tried to keep it that way. He asked, calmly trying to get her attention. Good man. Smart man at that. His gaze revealed earnest concern, as if asking her if she remembered to eat breakfast. Wow. That immediately tilted her, bro. Rage bait Sojiro. It was like another hammer to her head. What are these CGs? Oh no. It was true that Aoko had been glaring at Sojiro the entire time. Glaring her red hot daggers, in fact. Excuse me, glaring red hot daggers, in fact. Not just at him, but at the universe. Even on her best days, her roommate used to remark. That's what Alice sounds like? That's crazy. She'd been warned that her emotions were so naked on her face that people treated her like a powder keg. How naive could the boy be that he could not pick up on this? I my best days are stress days, bro. My best days are stress days. Even she found her own attempt to reassure herself unconvincing. It began to dawn on Aoko, far too late, that compared to her, this laid back transfer student might as well have been from another planet. Oh, hold on. There you go. Hold on. Uh, this would be so much easier if I just had my controller plugged in, but I gotta learn the controls. I gotta. Uh, hmm. What the heck? There you go. Okay, there you go. In response to her words, the Martian clapped his hands together. What an earnest young man. Sojiro accepted her reasoning without argument, though he still had no idea what kind of emotion she was trying to express. It was as if he could hear the words but didn't grasp the meaning. Ideas that should have connected were instead separated into blocks. Mr. Yamashiro's words made sense to her now. What was odd about this boy went way beyond naivety. A stranger in a strange land he may be, but it was only civilized to forget him some jet-lagged induced confusing. It was only civilized to forgive him some jet-lag induced confusion. She had regained her composure. Sojiro raised his hand and stopped in his tracks. Ako waited for Sojiro to continue. The boy was patient to a fault. She rubbed her forehead with her hand again, nursing a vague feeling of uneasiness. Uh-huh. A long silence. Though she knew it wouldn't change the situation, she remembered her regret at answering the phone that morning. He meant no harm. She repeated this thought like a mantra in an attempt to keep her impulses in check. With that vague answer, she started to walk again, and turned her gaze away from this weird stranger named Sojiro Suzuki. While what constitutes normal is certainly up for debate, most would undoubtedly refer to him as so. He was a simple and nice boy with nondescript features. If you were an ice cream flavor, you would be vanilla. That's crazy. Wow. And Sojiro found Aoko to be very businesslike and full of life. There was certain purpose to her movements, as they began and ended in an orderly fashion. The way her finger raised when she pointed at things. The way she made her way across the hallways and classrooms. The way she would occasionally glance back at him to make sure he was keeping pace. Each and every movement was so impressive that he couldn't take his eyes off her. Aoko showed him to his homeroom classroom C of the 11th grade. Oh, dang, they're juniors. The room certainly displayed more of a human touch than the previous meeting room, but Sojiro was none the wiser as to its function. Aoko gave a brief... Wait, here. Oh my goodness. Aoko gave a brief explanation before they visited individual subject classrooms, as well as the gym, the cafeteria, the locker room, and the school infirmary. Sojiro asked so many questions that much time passed before they reached the AV room on the second floor. Sojiro stopped, looking genuinely concerned. Golly. Okay, the tour had begun around 10, which meant that 3 hours had passed. A tour of a school shouldn't take anywhere near this long. Aoko glared at Sojiro. She was being sarcastic, of course, knowing full well he would never pick up on it. To her surprise, he looked down apologetically, unable to hide his dejection. Oh, that's so mean. The guy before her now was nothing like earlier. In contrast to seeing his once impenetrable veneer when they first met, she found herself feeling sympathetic. Momentarily, at least, until her irritation returned in full force. Of course it did. Sojiro's gaze wondered if he was worried about something. If he was worried about the weather, he would have had a hard time seeing as there was no windows in his hallway. Yeah, I know where he has to be. You know, way, bro. she, excuse me. She yelled at him, unable to hold back her fury. Sojiro's face lit up, as if he finally understood what she was asking him. He said with perfectly straight face. That's so funny. Her frustration was natural. Still, she did everything she could to stop her feelings and fake a smile. Yeah, why is she... Oh my gosh, right away. She took a step forward. Feeling the mood change drastically, Sojiro took a step back. Oh my gosh. Oh my goodness. What is she about to do to him? And another. And another. No matter how many steps he took back, she kept edging toward him. She was smiling, but he thought he could see the blood boiling underneath her skin. Yo. Oh my gosh. He had no intention of mocking her, though at this point he doubted presenting any evidence to prove this would do much to erase that forced smile on her face. Let me explain. His arms raised in surrender. She halted her advance and freed her face from that unseemly smile. Yeah. Yeah. But students. Oh, I forgot. Yeah, he read that. Stop being mean to him. Oh my gosh. Alright. Alka's face lit up as she realized he might not be the piece of work she thought him to be. Yeah. Though still irritated, her opinion of him changed a little. She was impressed that he was able to take care of his tuition and living expenses on his own. She could also empathize with him having no time to oneself. Her anger began to subside. The words part-time job were about the last thing she ever expected to hear out of this country boy's mouth. I wonder what she thought the secret was. She had no idea what his question meant, but she at least understood he was trying to be considerate. Just it took her by surprise. She figured he'd be just as tense about people's feelings as he was about everything else. Nah, leave him alone, he's smart. First though, she thought it best that they both stopped by the faculty room. Mr. Yamashiro had mentioned that the transfer procedures had already been completed, so all that remained was for him to sign off on her duties. She had no interest whatsoever in these pointless wrap-up meeting. Oh, excuse me. There it was again. Whatever Sojiro was getting at, Aka had no idea. She shooed him away with her hand. His face bent into a broad smile, as if he found the gesture endearing. It was a softer expression that she had grown accustomed to seeing out of him. It was the kind of smile that would make anyone smile back. Well, most people at least. Aoko Aozaki didn't betray the slightest hint of a smile. Oh, goodness, I keep forgetting I'm streaming. I'm streaming. And with that friendly farewell, Sojiro walked toward the end of the hallway. Or so she thought before he turned to the next class over. Sojiro headed straight for one of the classroom windows. Wherever he opened it with ease, or excuse me, whereupon he opened it with ease. The chilly November air filled the room as the soft sounds of the rain doubled in volume. In that instant, she realized his intention with opening the window. She really hadn't, or excuse me, she really wished she hadn't. She already had one leg out the window when he dashed to stop her. Excuse me, when she dashed to stop him. She saw the light of understanding dawning in his eyes. Her insult went right over his head. That just, oh my goodness, I almost died. He put his leg back inside and closed it. This is a goofball. What the heck? His school uniform was soaking wet from the rain. He bid her farewell before running away down the hall. Why is he running? She hoped he would walk down the stairs and lead through the school entrance like a normal person. The image of him disappearing into the distance popped into her head in spite of her ire. She had no intention of spending any more time with him, and yet she felt strangely anxious. She couldn't tell if the feeling was fueled by concern or irritation. Why had she even gotten angry in the first? Excuse me, angry with this insignificant transfer student in the first place? A strange day with a strange transfer student resulting in strange emotions. Her head tilted as she reflected on what should have been a more enjoyable day than the irritating experience she had just had. The sound of the rain echoed quietly all around her. The gray sky seemed frozen in time. It was impossible to discern whether it was morning or evening. Mr. Yamashiro and Aoko were likely the only ones left at school. The unlit classroom looked overly gloomy and ominous as Aoko stood in it alone. The October sky is looking ominous, bro. Even though I know it's November, but still. She put up her left sleeve. Her dainty, unremarkable watch showed that it was almost 1 o'clock. She looked out the window at the grounds below. She saw a boy in a uniform running through the rain without an umbrella. A sight she must have seen before, for whatever reason. Affected her far more than she wished. What is this? What am I looking? What is going on with the monitor? What is that? Weird. Whatever. Weird. Alka did not stop by the Falcontoon before heading home. While Mr. Yamashiro's offer to drive her home was tempting, she decided it would ultimately be far more satisfying to ruin his day as just that he had her. Wow. Spiteful teenager. She walked as quietly as she could toward the edges and opened her bright red umbrella. As she had predicted that morning, the rain was waning in the afternoon. At this rate, it would probably cease completely in an hour or so. Distant sunshine would likely have reached her by the time she arrived home. She shrugged her shoulders in resignation. She neither liked nor disliked the rain, but she found herself enjoying her walk home with her red umbrella in hand. The teachers at Misaki High School weren't fond of bright colors, so Aoko's red umbrella was an unusual sight. A ghost story about how the umbrella was once pure white had been making the rounds, but it featured Aoko instead of a ghost. It was with the umbrella that she made her way toward the Misaki station. Misaki Private High School took its namesake from the town it was in. The area was once a sprawl of farmland and woodland, but rapid growth over the last 10 years had led to unprecedented modernization. My goodness. There was some who fought to preserve Misaki's natural treasures. With those words, the mayor snuffed out the voices of the minority and ushered in a long-term plan for new urban development. More than enough funds for the urban development were collected, and the unassuming town of Misaki became the largest municipality of Misaki City in merely 10 years. Even though it looked like the modernity of neighboring Yashirogi. I'm sorry if I'm butchering these names, by the way. or the elegance of Misaki Hills. Urbanization had been contained to the lowlands around the station. Most of the hills and mountains still standing as they did 10 years, or 10 years prior. The exhaustion of funds succeeded in protecting the old Misaki where the citizens could not. It became a truly a truly odd suburban town, welcoming, good lord, I cannot talk, welcoming an increasingly urban population with its vestiges of old country charm. Misaki High School was a private school established long before the town's current state. The original campus, built 50 years ago, was located high up in the mountains, making its current location its second incarnation. The path to the old grounds was not only steep and remote, it had become an overgrown game trail with the passage of time. For these reasons, among others, Misaki High School had been shuttered until almost 20 years ago, when it received a donation from a department store chain that allowed for the construction of a new campus in the city. And thus, Misaki High School reopened its doors, the old woodland campus forgotten. In fact, most of the students attending Misaki High School were not from Misaki at all. The hardy rustic people of his country town preferred prefectural schools to private ones. Truth be told, Aoko herself was one of them. What she had wanted after junior high was to move to Tokyo, where she hoped to spend her days touring her favorite bands on her way to entering a public university. But her hopes were dashed with her sister's departure, so here she was, walking alone as hell with only a red umbrella to keep her company, what should have been a day off. Her frustration evaporated into the cold December air. I thought she said it was November. Whatever, whatever winter month it is, I guess. With those words, her mood brightened a bit as she left the school in her wake. The busier part of town met her at the bottom of the gently sloping road. Misaki's train station was brand new. Once looking no prettier than an abandoned factory, it had been renovated into a multi-purpose structure with huge department stores on its east and west sides. When the department stores first opened, Alco and her friends had been impressed with their modern feel, but in time, the stores too became dated. She had no shopping to do today, so she passed them by. What she really wanted to do was rest at a cafe, but she fought the urge, knowing her roommate would never let her hear the end of it if she frittered away her money. What was... What's going on? What's happening? She looked back and blinked. For just a moment, she could have swore she had seen someone suspicious in a red dress out of the corner of her eye. Oh. I wonder if I could have seen it if I was paying attention. Must have been her imagination. Sixth sense chill she was experiencing down her spine was a familiar one at this point. She continued her walk home, brushing off the event as if it had never happened. In time, the chill faded, and all that was left were the sounds of the town. She sighed heavily. Had she imagined it? Even if it had all been in her head, she was far from comfortable with the feeling that still lingered. She grumbled under her breath. Unfortunately, summer and bugs go hand in hand. She could see how bugs could be drawn to all the sweet fruit. Ranked with grease and heat, the kitchen was closed for the time being. The lunch rush had come and gone, but one last battle remained. Dinner time. Only after evening chaos could the kitchen crew remove their white armor and call it a day. In the midst of the war zone was a lone newcomer. His voice was uneasy, betraying how new he was. His bright orange co-worker clasped his hands together as if to beg for forgiveness as he saddled him with his unreasonable task. 10 years ago, Misaki City was a town farm in Woodland. But everything had changed. The front of the station was now lined with tall, multi-story buildings, and the residential areas were similarly full of apartment complexes. The once rustic scenery around the station had long become a thing of the past. How? What? Oh, okay, I see it. Shiro Inuzuka was the only place in the city that still contained vestiges of the old town, a pocket of the past inside an urban jungle. The road extended up a conspicuously high hill to an old residential district far from the hustle and bustle of the train station. Long ago, it had been considered unwise to build on high ground, so nobody lived above a certain elevation. Shiro Inuzuka, sitting as it did atop a hill in the middle of town, was no exception to that convention and had no residences to speak of. I'm sorry, I gotta turn this music down, it's so loud. Audio. There you go. There you go. Alrighty. The asphalt continued for some time, eventually giving way to a mountain road that was once swallowed into the cover of trees. A lone vending machine stood to mark the boundary between town and beyond. A vending machine. That's weird. Even the children knew that there was nothing beyond the new playground and development that so enthralled them. Well, that was not entirely true. There was nothing besides the haunted house. Aoko Aozaki traversed a long slope. Below her, she could see the whole of Misaki. This magical town looked like a miniature set from this height. It looked like a painting if there had been a sea next to it, but unfortunately, Misaki was very much landlocked. Though it was overcast at the time, the scene was quite breathtaking on clear evenings. The view was the one thing that made the arduous climb worthwhile, and today, she had been denied even that. She is really pessimistic. Let me see. Okay. I was just checking something. Alrighty. Aoko be using this road to school, or to get to school for almost 2 years now, but the journey had never gotten easier. How long have I been doing this? About like almost an hour. Alright. I think I'll go for 2 today. With a weary shrug, she put her hand on a rusty iron fence. Quietly, the heavy gate swung open as if to welcome her home. I recognize this song. Boom, dun, 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 dun. So I think it's I forgot how to pronounce it, but it's Jimino P something. It's French. I know that. Like, yeah, Eric Satie, Jimino P #1. Again, I'm sorry if I'm butchering that, but the song is, I guess it's in the public domain, so a lot of people use it. It's a really good song. If you never heard it before, I really recommend it. Was there audio for this one? R. No, there isn't. Alright, I gotta reread that then. There sits atop the hill, that hill, a haunted house. That is how the story much shared around town used to begin. But fresh rumors about the house have sprung to life as almost as fast as the town's modernization. Despite being dilapidated and abandoned for many years, lights can be seen inside the house at night. An angry murder of crows often gathers atop the hill before mysteriously vanishing. So interesting that a group of crows is just called a murder of crows. To the point, like, it's a figure of speech, but it's legit. That's what they call them. It's weird. Children get lost in the fog, never to be seen again. Late at night, a shrieking sound could be heard all the way to town. This particular piece of slander was the one who, excuse me, that a really long sentence. Late at night, a shrieking sound can be heard all the way to town. This particular piece of slander was the one Aoko wished to describe to Okay, that's what it was. Okay, it was an aside. The final rumor was of an eye-catching luxury car that sometimes made its way up and down the hill. The rumors spread and grew by the day. And when they grew, the house that everyone thought had rotted away was restored over the recent years. This deep in a wood, on top of a hill no one dared to approach. Like a ruin, shrouded from view even on the brightest of days, stood a relic out of time, a building from a fairy tale. The house was the Koonji, because usually that would be Kanoji, but was the Koonji house, or let me see if I can look it up because I don't want to mispronounce it. Pronunciation. Never mind, I guess. Because I can't really. There's no pronunciation for it. Koonji Mansion. It's gonna go with that. Sorry if I'm mispronouncing it. Everyone in town knew about the witch's house on the hill. There you go. It was an unabashedly haunted house where Aoko Aozaki resided, for reasons known only to her. Needless to say, it was not really haunted. The Goji family home was a grand Western-style mansion with a long and storied history, stretching all the way back to England. It was too small to be a dormitory, yet too big to be called a house. The main building contained as many as 3 normal houses worth of rooms and was surrounded by a large, all-encompassing courtyard. The perimeter of the grounds was surrounded by a high iron fence. Excuse me. Oh, there goes everybody else. Oh well. The perimeter of the grounds was surrounded by a high iron fence covered in thorny vines. There was also an annex to the main building. Given such extravagance, it was no wonder that it inspired rumors. To the town residents, the mere existence of such a lavish and out-of-place mansion on top of a hill was cause for suspicion. Rumors, lies, and slander were the prices to be paid for fame. With only 2 lodgers, it was hard to disagree with the perception that vampires must be living here. She put her hand on the front door. It was a grand double door that would have been paired well with a brass lock, and yet it was secure with little more than a simple keyhole. Pushing it open with one hand, she entered a supposedly haunted house. And by the way, if vampires were not enough to scare you, ghosts were known to appear on certain nights. Much like the weather outside, the foyer was overcast with shades of gray. Perhaps like a deliberate design, the architect had chosen not to include any lights in the entrance area. The ceiling was 2 floors high. The only light in the room came from the skylight. It was particularly gloomy on rainy days. On moonless nights, it was like the world itself ceased to be. Alka decided the drawing room to the east would be a good place to rest, but knowing that she would not be able to relax until she changed clothes, she started up the stairs. The stairs curled up to the wall to the second floor hall. There was a third floor attic as well, accessible from the far end of the hall. She never set foot in there in the 2 years she lived here, though. The Kolonji mansion was more or less divided into two wings, east and west wing. Aoko had been given the entire east wing, but 2 rooms were more than enough as far as she was concerned. She had no desire to open a door that would trap you in a storybook world, or lead to an attic that had only been used for storage these last 5 years. Aoko's room was at the end of the east wing's long corridor. She had left it for a smaller room for no other reason than that she thought it would be easier to clean. It was furnished with a large bed, her beloved mahogany desk, a wardrobe and chest for her clothes, and 2 9-shelf bookcases. That was the extent of what she brought from home. Her entire life of 16 years reduced to this. She also borrowed the next room down for her own purposes. She needed to see if the project had been working on all night had been excuse me. She needed to see if the project she had been working on all night had borne fruit. The study next door served as proof of the life she had been living for the last year, how different that life was from what she had lived before. It was not a room for the person she had been. It was the room for the person she would eventually become, a place of solitude that she could only enter. Or so she thought. The noisy neighbor that had intruded upon her sanctuary flew away. While not exceptionally talented, Aoko did not lack for effort and was not afraid to fail. One could have almost mistaken her approach for optimism. She changed out of her uniform and returned to the first floor. Down the stairs she opened the door to the east wing into the corridor as dark as a cellar. The absence of windows meant it was pitch black without the lights on, so she flicked the switch to enter the nearby doorway. Sonny. Ain't no way. It had been her idea to update the drawing room. Oh man. I think I might go to bed after this stream. I'm so tired. It had been another day. Excuse me. It had been another. I read this before. Why am I struggling with it now? It had been her idea to update the drawing room. The walls were decorated with extravagant patterns, and around the room were large, majestic sofas and a luxurious Persian rug. Amidst it all was a 30-inch television that seemed completely out of place. I mean, to be fair, it does. Even this low texture sofa looks in place. It kind of looks AI. That's weird. Like, I know it's just the way that it's drawn, but like these 3 backrests look AI compared to everything else here. I'm not accusing this game of doing that, by the way. I'm just like, just a weird thing. It stood looking over the furniture like the emperor with no clothes. The mansion's owner would have rather done without it, but to a commoner like Aoko, it was an essential commodity. They had fought over its presence at first, but eventually came to an agreement and now mutually enjoyed this modern comfort. Now in a somewhat pleasant mood, she decided to brew some tea. She boiled some water in the kitchen, prepared a teapot, and made herself some black tea. With a flop, she sank into the sofa. She took a sip of her tea, then another. Beautiful. There it was. Nighttime. Lulled by the ticking of the clock, she took a third sip as she pondered how to spend the afternoon. Sofa almost seemed to be inviting her, as she sunk even further into its comforting embrace. Aoko blearily? Never heard that word before. Aoko blearily opened her eyes as she lifted her body up from the cushions. And there's Alice. This is no dream or delusion. At some point, a girl had sat down from across from her. Not the least bit surprised, she reached out for her teacup, but the tea within had got completely cold. She asked the question to the girl on the other side of the table. The girl answered without lifting her gaze. Once silent, she could have been mistaken for a beautiful doll. The girl sitting on the opposite sofa was reading an old book. She had delicate limbs and pale white skin. Not a hint of humanity emanated from her melancholic aura. She had darker hair than Aoko, and her icy eyes were focused on the pages in front of her. Her clothes resembled that of a nun, but were actually her school uniform. In Aoko's humble opinion, the gloominess suited her. She evoked something like out of a painting. She evoked something like out of a painting. This music is really good, by the way. I know I haven't mentioned it before, but it's really, really good. There's something unreal about her, as if she were frozen in time. The white of her gently arched neck was so lovely that even Aoko found herself enchanted by it. The girl was one of the haunted house's two residents. Her name was Alice Koonji, and she was the same age as Aoko. Alice answered indifferently. Not that it bothered Aoko, who was not used to it. She looked at the clock on the wall and saw that it was already 7. She had been asleep for 2 hours. The day had been a rough one for her. She had slept little that night before, so I was so surprised that she had dozed off for as long as she did. As long as she had. Aoko drank down the rest of the cold tea in one gulp. In the poorly heated Koonji mansion, that was more than enough to clear her head and wake up. Aoko shrugged her shoulders as if resigning herself to her fate. Oh, excuse me, I forgot. I'm playing a game. After 2 years together, they knew each other quite well. Aoko had one way of asking questions, and Alice had another. Alice asked without raising her head, and Aoko gave her the details. How could try to laugh it off as if it was someone else's problem? Alice was very much on point today. It was true that despite the outward appearances, Aoko was seething with frustration. That aside, leave him alone. Oh wow, that's phlegm. Excuse me. Alice raised her head in response to hearing her name, but Aoko kept going on before she could get a word in edgewise. Aoko, after all, expected no sympathy in the first place. What she really was worried about was having to clean up that mess and if and when it happened. That had to be it. If not, it means she had no real idea why she could not get him out of his head. That's so weird. Yeah, that's a typo, right? Yeah, that's definitely a typo. That's weird. Oh well, I'm not here to judge, so. Oh, I forgot. My fault, my fault, my fault. I forgot. Alright. Forgot. Still streaming. But from her eyes, it was clear that the question of whether they would get along was irrelevant, given that they would never meet in the first place. Ako gave a non-committal response. Ako seemed nostalgic over her now deceased grandfather. Akko sighed and laid back on the sofa. The soft cushions caved in under her weight. Alice shot a glance at Aoko. Her body, buried in the sofa, remained as still as a corpse. It was clear Aoko had tuned out of the conversation. Alice silently chastised her with a look. The more she thought about it, the less important the events of the day seemed to become. If she just ignored Alice, the conversation would end there. They would eventually get up and leave today's mistake a result for another day. However, that's not the kind of person Aoko Aozaki was. She asked, still lying down. There you go. There you go. So the experiment alluded to it a little bit, vaguely. But here we have, like, just spelled out, magic is involved in this story. That I knew, because, you know, like, you'll see later on by the end of the story, but magic is important here. This is not your everyday slice of life, some would say. The coldness in her voice made Aoko gnash her teeth. She knew what Alice wanted to say. She knew better than anyone. The veneer she wore for the school was different than the way she lived at home. What could be called hiding in plain sight, Alice thought it was silly. What the science told her was, today's failure was not a colossal one. It just happened to upset the delicate balance between her home and school lives, chasing one at the expense of the other. And yet, that careless mistake was a clear sign of Aoko's lack of commitment. She had only known for sure for the last year and a half, but she had a hunch for as long as she could remember. Make the choice, and the day will come. It was no wonder that her morals and conscience had been stripped away. Aoko pushed herself back up. She was met by Alice's cold beauty and wordless gaze. Aoko could not help but shake her head, feeling like she was hearing something similar for the second time that day. Even in the comfort of her own home, of her own. I mean, that works, but usually would have thought it would be home, but again, not my place. Not my place. Oh, I forgot, like, my own stream. Even in the comfort of her own, she couldn't banish thoughts of that country boy from her mind. After that brief exchange, Alice turned her attention to the book on her lap. Shop talk was over. Now they could return to their normal relationship as roommates. Aoko grabbed the remote and turned on the TV. Since Alice was busy reading, Aoko decided to tune into a variety show that had already started. Alice started to speak but suddenly cut herself off. One of her delicate hands raced to her mouth. She'd always cut herself off the second she realized she was about to say something trivial. Sometimes, her self-restraint wouldn't hit too late. Would hit too late. She would make a gesture like the one she was making now. It occurred to Aoko that sound her cute little roommate made just now was different than the what she blurted out in times past. Aoko turned on the volume on the TV. Her intense eyes lit up like those of a mischievous cat. She's such a troll, bro, in a way. That's adorable in a way. I love that, like, that style. Alice looked away bashfully, not knowing if she should bring it up or not. It was times like these that her expression carried a real warmth and surprising charm. If he could see her in this moment, Alice's father would have to admit that her name suited her perfectly. Aoko nodded, beckoning her to continue. The immediate onset sprite change is crazy. For a second, Aoko thought that Alice was trying and failing miserably to make a joke again. One would think that about anyone, really, but she seemed completely serious. Even Alice's sense of humor fell flat for Aoko. The story already sounded more fanciful than Alice's usual attempt at jokes. Aoko concluded that her roommate was talking about something that she had actually seen. Alice thought attentively of her words. Alice's gaze shifted at that. Hako loved getting takeout, and her face glowed as she spoke. They had no hard rules for dinner, but if one of them was in the mood to cook, they made it a point to make enough for two. At the very worst, they spent entire weeks without dinner, but the two of them agreed that this was the system that best worked for them. Whether they found cooking to be too much effort or simply liked ordering out, nights like this were a common occurrence, much to the chagrin of the restaurants of Masaki Town. Delivering to the mansion meant coming all the way up to the top of this hill, the source of their disgruntlement. The hungry, the hungry student council president laid out a stack of takeout menus like she might find a deck of cards, and excitedly scanned for anything that stood out. Alice casually responded without sparing so much as a glance. Oh. Oh. Okay. Oh. I 0 for 15 already. With those words, Aoko froze. All deliveries required a minimum of 2 items, so she was out of luck without an accomplice. Cruel society had decided it couldn't be bothered to deliver to a princess who only ordered a single serving of food. Incidentally, to counteract orders from the Hilltop Mansion, the restaurants had declared the minimum number of orders will be 3, starting next year. Aoko and Alice were still in the dark to this fiendish change of direction. Wow. Poor Al. That's so far. That's actually crazy how far that is. Insane. Unfortunately for Alko, she had been she had been out. Huh? Oh, she had been too out of it to even remember that she was the one who had fallen asleep. It was unknown how serious Akko was being, but she was visibly angry. She had already woken up hungry that morning. From the time she was called into school until now, she had consumed nothing but tea. It's a small miracle that her stomach was out growling. She knew it was her own fault, but she persisted, wanting to get revenge on Alice for scolding her earlier. Aoko had kicked the hornet's nest. Alice's icy gaze pierced right through her. Aoko had certainly crossed the line by going on and on about how the sushi circled around the restaurant, while Alice ate her convenience store meal. But new things fascinated her, and she couldn't contain a curiosity towards the conveyor belt sushi shops that started popping up at the time. They were nothing short of miraculous. Even honesty can be a sin, given the right circumstance. Alice went back to her book without so much as recognizing the question. The fact that she did not confirm it made Aoko anxious. She stood up, announcing her intent to no one in particular. Alice's hand froze on her current page. She suddenly shut the book she was reading and stood up, as if at wit's end. She walked across the drawing room with her book in hand. When she reached the door, she stopped and turned to Aoko. Aoko nodded timidly, cowed by Alice's sudden vigor. Alice continued in her matter-of-fact way. And with that brief response, she left the room. Oh. Yeah. Save. Let's do this one. I guess that's the end of chapter 1. The heck was weird. Really weird. hmm. Oh man. Wait. I think I'm done for tonight. There you go. Alright. Well, shoot, that's gonna be it for me for now. Hopefully you enjoyed. Not a long one, but I'm sick, so I'm gonna try to take it easy for the rest of the night. But thank you all for watching, and I'll see you all in the next video.